Maria Santos was 47 years old when she first touched a piano. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the community center of her small town in the Philippines. She had walked past that room 100 times before, always stopping for just a moment to listen to the sounds coming from inside. The music always made her heart feel something she could not explain. It was like someone was speaking directly to her soul. That day was different. The door was open and the room was empty. The old piano sat in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. Sunlight came through the window and fell on the black and white keys. Maria stood at the door for a long time. Her hands were rough from years of washing clothes and cleaning houses. She worked as a helper for 3 different families in the city. Every morning she woke up at 4 o'clock. Every night she came home after 9. Her life was simple and hard, but she never complained. Maria had grown up in a very poor family. Her father was a fisherman who died when she was only 8 years old. Her mother raised 6 children alone. There was never enough food on the table. School was a dream that Maria had to give up when she was 12. She started working in the rice fields to help her mother. Music was something she only heard from the radio of their neighbor's house. She would sit outside their window and listen for hours. Now standing in that empty room, Maria felt like a child again. She walked slowly toward the piano. Her heart was beating fast. She sat down on the small wooden bench and placed her fingers on the keys. She pressed one key, then another. The sounds were strange but beautiful. She smiled. For the first time in many years, she felt truly happy. The door opened behind her. Maria jumped up from the bench like she had done something wrong. A group of women walked in. They were members of the community center's ladies' club. They were all well-dressed and carried expensive bags. They looked at Maria with confusion at first, then with something that looked like judgment. One of the women, Mrs., was the wife of the town mayor. She walked forward with her arms crossed. She looked at Maria's simple dress and worn-out shoes. She looked at Maria's hands, which were dry and cracked from years of hard work. "What are you doing here?" Mrs. asked. Her voice was cold and sharp. Maria felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. She tried to explain. "I was just looking. I heard the music before and I wanted to see the piano. I have always loved music. I want to learn how to play." The room went silent for a moment. Then Mrs. laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made Maria feel small and worthless. The other women joined in. They whispered to each other and pointed at Maria's hands. "You want to play the piano," Mrs. said between laughs. "Look at your hands. Those are hands for washing dishes, not for playing music. The piano is not for people like you. You should stick to what you know." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had faced hard times before. She had survived hunger and poverty. She had buried her mother and raised her younger siblings alone. She was not weak, but the laughter hurt more than she expected. It reminded her of all the times people had told her she was not good enough. She walked out of the room without saying another word. The laughter followed her down the hallway. She could still hear it when she stepped outside into the afternoon sun. She walked home that day with heavy steps. Her small house was at the edge of town, near the river. It had only 2 rooms, but it was clean and full of love. Her youngest daughter was waiting for her at the door. Was 17 years old. She was smart and beautiful and full of dreams. She was the reason Maria worked so hard. Maria wanted to finish school and have a better life. She wanted her daughter to never feel the shame she had felt today. That night Maria could not sleep. She lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. The laughter kept playing in her head, but something else was also there. It was the memory of how the piano keys felt under her fingers. It was the sound of that single note she had played. It was beautiful, and it was hers. Maria made a decision that night. She would learn to play the piano. She did not know how. She did not have money for lessons. She did not have a piano at home, but she would find a way. She had always found a way. Life had taught her that nothing was impossible if you wanted it badly enough. The next morning, Maria woke up at her usual time. She made breakfast for and packed her lunch for school. She kissed her daughter goodbye and walked to her first job of the day. But this time, something was different. There was a fire burning inside her. It was small, but it was there, and she was determined to keep it alive. She started saving money. Every peso she could spare went into a small jar hidden under her bed. She stopped buying snacks for herself. She walked to work instead of taking the jeepney. It was a long walk, but she did not mind. Every step brought her closer to her dream. Maria also started visiting the community center more often. She would go late at night when everyone had gone home. The security guard, an old man named, felt sorry for her. He let her into the building after hours. She would sit at the piano and touch the keys. She did not know what she was doing, but she practiced anyway. She tried to remember the songs she had heard on the radio as a child. She tried to make her fingers move the way she imagined real piano players did. Weeks turned into months. Maria's fingers began to learn. They were slow and clumsy at first, but they improved. She found an old music book in the garbage behind a school. The pages were torn and dirty, but she could still read the notes. She taught herself to read music by comparing the notes on the page to the sounds on the piano. It was hard. Sometimes she wanted to give up. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered the laughter, and the fire inside her grew stronger. 6 months passed since that painful day at the community center. Maria had developed a secret routine that no one knew about except the old security guard. Every night after her work was done, she would walk to the community center. She would wait in the shadows until the last person left, then would open the back door for her, and she would slip inside like a ghost. The piano became her best friend. She talked to it in whispers. She told it about her day, about her dreams, about the laughing women who had made her feel so small. The piano listened, and slowly it began to answer her. The notes that once sounded random and confused started to make sense. Her fingers, those rough and cracked fingers that Mrs. had mocked, began to dance across the keys. Maria discovered that she had a gift. She could hear a song once and remember it forever. The melodies that had lived in her head for decades were finally finding their way out through her fingers. She played the old folk songs her mother used to sing. She played the love songs she had heard on the radio during her teenage years. She even started creating her own simple tunes, melodies that came from deep inside her heart. But life was not easy. Maria was exhausted all the time. She worked 3 jobs during the day and practiced piano at night. She slept only 4 or 5 hours. Her body was tired, but her spirit was alive in a way it had never been before. She lost weight because she was saving her food money for her piano fund. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her daughter started to worry. One evening followed her mother. She watched from a distance as Maria walked toward the community center. She saw open the back door. She heard the first notes of the piano floating through the night air, stood outside the window and listened. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had never heard anything so beautiful, and it was coming from her mother's hands. Did not confront her mother that night. Instead, she went home and lay awake, thinking about what she had seen. Her mother had always told her to chase her dreams. Her mother had sacrificed everything so that could go to school and have a future. Now understood that her mother had dreams too, dreams that had been buried for 47 years. The next day went to the public library after school. She searched online for piano tutorials. She printed out sheets of music and exercise guides. She found videos of famous pianists and saved them on her old phone. That evening, she placed everything on her mother's bed with a note that said, "I know your secret. I am proud of you. Keep playing, Mama." Maria cried when she found the gift. She had tried so hard to hide her practice sessions from her daughter. She was embarrassed about her dream. She thought would think she was being foolish. But's note changed everything. For the first time, Maria felt like someone believed in her. Mother and daughter began to work together, would come home from school and quiz Maria on music theory. They would watch piano videos together on phone, even started doing extra tutoring jobs to help save money for the piano fund. The jar under Maria's bed grew heavier each week. Meanwhile, the women at the community center continued with their regular activities. Mrs. and her friends held their weekly meetings, completely unaware of what was happening in the same building after dark. They organized charity events and social gatherings. They talked about fashion and gossip. They never once thought about the cleaning woman they had laughed at months ago. One day, Maria overheard a conversation while she was cleaning one of the houses where she worked. The lady of the house was talking on the phone about a piano competition. It was being organized by the Regional Arts Council. Anyone could enter, regardless of age or background. The prize was not money, but something even more valuable. The winner would get to perform at the Grand Concert Hall in Manila during the Christmas celebration. Maria's heart raced when she heard this. She had never performed for anyone except the empty room and, unknowingly, her daughter. The idea of playing in front of people terrified her, but it also excited her in a way she could not explain. She wrote down the details of the competition on a piece of paper and tucked it into her pocket. That night she showed the paper too. Her daughter's eyes lit up with excitement. "You have to enter," Mama said. "This is your chance. This is what you have been working for." Maria shook her head. "I am not ready. I am just a beginner. The other players will be professionals. They will have studied at music schools. They will laugh at me just like those women did." Took her mother's hands and looked into her eyes. Those women laughed because they do not understand what real strength looks like. They have never had to fight for anything in their lives. But you, Mama, you have been fighting since you were 8 years old. You survived things that would break most people. Playing the piano is not about being perfect. It is about telling your story, and your story deserves to be heard. Maria thought about her daughter's words for many days. She continued her nightly practice sessions, but now she practiced with more purpose. She chose a piece to perform, a classical song that she had fallen in love with. It was called Claire Lune by. The music was soft and sad and beautiful, like moonlight falling on water. It reminded Maria of the nights she used to spend by the river as a child, watching the moon rise over the bamboo trees. Learning Claire Lune was the hardest thing Maria had ever done. The song required a gentleness and control that she was still developing. Her fingers often made mistakes. Some nights she played the same section 50 times and still could not get it right. She would cry from frustration and exhaustion, but she never gave up. Watched Maria's journey with quiet admiration. He was 73 years old and had seen many things in his life, but he had never seen someone want something as badly as Maria wanted this. One night he brought her a cup of hot ginger tea. He sat down beside her and said, "You know, I used to play the guitar when I was young. I was not very good, but I loved it. Then life happened. I got married, had children, had to work. I forgot about my guitar. It is still in my closet, covered in dust. Do not let your piano become like my guitar. Do not let life make you forget what makes your soul sing." Maria looked at the old man with tears in her eyes. She realized that her dream was not just about proving the laughing women wrong. It was about refusing to let her spirit die. It was about showing her daughter that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. The deadline for the competition registration was approaching fast. Maria had still not decided whether to enter. The fear was strong, but the desire was stronger. One night, after a particularly good practice session, she sat at the piano and closed her eyes. She imagined herself on a big stage, playing for hundreds of people. She imagined the applause, the lights, the feeling of the keys under her fingers. And for the first time, she did not feel afraid. She felt ready. The next morning, Maria walked to the community center during her lunch break. She went to the main office and asked for a registration form for the piano competition. The woman behind the desk looked at her with surprise. She recognized Maria as one of the cleaning ladies who worked in the neighborhood, but she gave her the form without asking any questions. Maria filled out the form with trembling hands. She wrote her name, her age, her address. Under musical background, she wrote, "Self-taught, practicing for 6 months." She handed the form back to the woman and walked out into the sunlight. Her hands were still shaking, but her heart was calm. Whatever happened next, she had taken the first step, and no one could take that away from her. The news spread through the small town like wildfire. The cleaning lady had entered the piano competition. People whispered about it in the market. They talked about it at the hair salon. They discussed it over coffee and rice cakes. Some people laughed, just like the women at the community center had laughed. They said Maria was wasting her time. They said she was embarrassing herself. They said poor people should know their place. But others were inspired. The fish vendor at the morning market told Maria that he admired her courage. The old woman who sold vegetables patted her hand and said, "God bless you, child. Show them what we are made of." Even some of the younger mothers at the community center started looking at Maria differently. They saw something in her eyes that they recognized. It was the same hunger for more that they felt in their own hearts. Mrs. heard the news and was not happy. She could not believe that the woman she had mocked had the nerve to enter a real competition. She told her friends that it was a joke. She said Maria would make a fool of herself and embarrass the whole town. But deep inside, Mrs. felt something else. It was a small, uncomfortable feeling that she did not want to name. It was the fear that she might be wrong about Maria. The competition was 3 months away. Maria used every spare moment to practice. She woke up earlier and stayed up later. Her fingers became faster and more confident. The calluses on her hands, the same calluses that Mrs. had looked down upon, became her greatest strength. They protected her fingers from the endless hours of practice. They were proof of how hard she was willing to work. Took on more responsibilities at home so her mother could focus on her music. She cooked dinner and cleaned the house. She helped the neighbors with their children to earn extra money. Mother and daughter became a team, united by a shared dream. Their small house by the river was filled with hope and determination. One evening, something unexpected happened. Maria was practicing at the community center when she heard footsteps in the hallway. She stopped playing, her heart pounding with fear. The footsteps came closer. The door opened. Maria expected to see, but instead, a young woman stood in the doorway. She was tall and elegant, with long black hair and a gentle face. She looked at Maria with curious eyes. "Please," the young woman said softly, "do not stop. I was listening from outside. It was beautiful." Maria did not know what to say. She had never performed for anyone before, not intentionally. Her fingers froze above the keys. The young woman walked into the room and sat down on a chair near the piano. "My name is Isabella," she said. "I am a music teacher. I just moved to this town last month. I heard about you from the market vendors. They said there is a woman here who taught herself to play piano. They said she practices every night. I wanted to see for myself." Maria felt her face flush with embarrassment. She looked down at her worn-out clothes and her rough hands. "I am nothing special," she said. "I am just a cleaning lady who likes music. I do not even know if I am playing correctly." Isabella smiled. "Will you play something for me? I would like to hear." Maria took a deep breath. Her hands were trembling. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play Claire Lune. At first, her playing was stiff and nervous. She made a few mistakes in the opening measures, but as the music continued, something changed. Maria forgot about Isabella. She forgot about her fear and her doubt. She became lost in the melody, in the story the music was telling. When she finished, the room was silent. Maria was afraid to look up. She was sure Isabella would tell her that she was terrible, that she had no business entering a competition. But when she finally raised her eyes, she saw tears rolling down Isabella's cheeks. "That was extraordinary," Isabella whispered. "You have raw talent. Your technique needs work, but your feeling, your emotion, that cannot be taught. That comes from the soul. How long have you been playing?" 7 months, Maria answered. "I started last year, after some women laughed at me for wanting to learn." Isabella shook her head in disbelief. 7 months. Most students take years to play with that kind of emotional depth. You have a gift, Maria, a real gift. From that day forward, Isabella became Maria's teacher. She refused to accept any payment. She said that teaching Maria was a privilege, not a job. They met every evening at the community center after let them in. Isabella taught Maria proper technique, hand positions, and music theory. She helped Maria understand the structure of the songs she was playing. She corrected her mistakes gently and encouraged her constantly. Maria was a fast learner. All those years of hard work had taught her discipline and patience. She practiced every exercise Isabella gave her until she could do it perfectly. Her playing improved rapidly. The stumbles and hesitations disappeared. Her fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence and grace. Isabella also helped Maria prepare mentally for the competition. She told her about the judges, the other competitors, and what to expect on the day of the performance. She taught her breathing exercises to calm her nerves. She made Maria practice performing in front of small audiences, starting with just, and then gradually adding more people. The word spread that Maria had a real teacher now. Some people became more supportive. They saw that she was serious about her dream. They started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a chance. Others remained skeptical. They said Isabella was wasting her time on a lost cause. They said Maria was too old and too uneducated to compete with real musicians. Mrs. heard about Isabella and was irritated. She did not like that Maria was getting so much attention. She decided to use her influence to undermine Maria's efforts. She called her friends who were on the organizing committee of the competition. She suggested that the rules be changed to require participants to have formal music training. She said it would raise the prestige of the event. The committee discussed her suggestion, but in the end they rejected it. The competition was meant to discover hidden talents, they said. It was meant to give opportunities to people who might not have access to formal education. One of the committee members, an older woman named Mrs., spoke up in Maria's defense. She said that she had heard Maria play and was impressed. She said the competition should be about talent, not background. When Maria heard what had happened, she was hurt but not surprised. She had faced obstacles her whole life. This was just one more, but she was grateful to Mrs. and the others who had stood up for her. She realized that not everyone was like Mrs. There were good people in the world who wanted to see others succeed. The competition was now just 8 weeks away. Maria intensified her practice. She played Claire Lune over and over until she could perform it with her eyes closed. Isabella refined every detail from the dynamics to the phrasing to the pedaling. They worked on Maria's stage presence, teaching her how to walk to the piano, how to bow, how to sit with confidence. Every aspect of the performance was carefully planned. Watched her mother transform before her eyes. The tired, worn woman who came home every night from cleaning houses was becoming something else. When Maria sat at the piano, she was powerful and radiant. She was a musician, had never been more proud of anyone in her life. One night, after a particularly intense practice session, Maria sat with Isabella in the empty community center. The moon was full outside, casting silver light through the windows. Maria looked at her teacher and asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you think I can win?" Isabella thought for a long moment before answering. "I do not know if you will win, Maria. There will be many talented players at the competition. Some of them have been playing for decades, but I know one thing for certain. When you step onto that stage and play, everyone will feel something. They will feel your journey, your pain, your hope, and that is more valuable than any trophy." Maria nodded. She understood. The competition was not really about winning or losing. It was about proving that her dream was worth fighting for. It was about showing the world that a cleaning lady with rough hands could create beauty. It was about inspiring others who had been told they were not good enough. 8 weeks was not a long time, but Maria was determined to make every moment count. The final chapter of her preparation was about to begin, and whatever happened at the competition, she knew that her life had already changed forever. The final weeks before the competition were the most challenging of Maria's life. She pushed herself harder than ever before. Every night, after her cleaning jobs were finished, she would rush to the community center. Isabella would be waiting for her, ready with new exercises and corrections. They worked on every measure, every note, every tiny detail of the performance. Maria's body was struggling under the pressure. Her back ached from bending over the piano for hours. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. Her fingers sometimes cramped so badly that she could not straighten them, but she refused to slow down. The competition was coming, and she wanted to be ready. Noticed her mother's suffering and became worried. She begged Maria to rest, to take care of herself. But Maria would not listen. She had come too far to stop now. She told that the pain was temporary, but the regret of giving up would last forever. Did not argue anymore. She just made sure her mother ate well and helped massage her mother's tired hands every night. The town's attitude toward Maria had shifted significantly. Many people who had doubted her before were now cheering her on. They saw her dedication and were moved by it. Small shop owners would refuse to accept her money when she bought groceries. Children would wave at her on the street and call her the piano lady. Even some of the wealthier families she cleaned for started treating her with more respect. One afternoon, something unexpected happened at one of Maria's cleaning jobs. She worked at the home of the family, one of the richest families in town. Mrs. was a cold woman who rarely spoke to Maria beyond giving orders. But that day, she called Maria into the living room before she started her work. In the corner of the living room stood a beautiful grand piano. It was covered in a white cloth and clearly had not been played in years. Mrs. pointed at it and said, "My daughter used to play this piano. She studied at the best music schools in Manila, but she lost interest when she became a teenager. The piano has been sitting here, gathering dust, for almost a decade." Maria looked at the piano with longing. It was the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. The polished black wood gleamed even under the dusty cover. She could only imagine how it must sound. Mrs. continued, "I heard about your competition. I heard about how hard you have been working. I want you to practice on this piano today. It is a better instrument than the one at the community center. It will help you prepare." Maria was shocked. She did not know what to say. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thanked Mrs. over and over. She sat down at the grand piano and lifted the cover with trembling hands. When she pressed the first key, the sound that came out was like nothing she had ever heard before. It was rich and deep and resonant. It filled the room like warm sunlight. She played Claire Lune from beginning to end. Mrs. stood by the window, listening. When Maria finished, the older woman was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that Maria would never forget. "My daughter had all the advantages in the world. She had the best teachers, the best instruments, the best opportunities, but she never played with the passion you just showed. She never loved the music the way you love it. I was wrong to think that talent only comes from education and money. You have proven me wrong, and I am grateful." From that day on, Maria was allowed to practice at the home whenever she wanted. Mrs. even adjusted Maria's cleaning schedule to give her more time with the piano. The grand piano became Maria's new training ground. Its superior quality helped her hear the nuances in her playing more clearly. She could refine her technique in ways that were not possible on the old community center piano. Isabella was thrilled when she heard the news. She started coming to the house to continue Maria's lessons. The three women, teacher, student, and unexpected patron, formed an unusual alliance. Mrs. would sit in the corner of the living room, watching the lessons with genuine interest. She started learning about music again, rediscovering the love for piano that she had tried to pass on to her daughter years ago. Meanwhile, Mrs. was becoming increasingly frustrated. Her attempts to undermine Maria had failed. The competition organizers had rejected her suggestion to change the rules. The town was rallying behind the cleaning lady. Even some of her own friends had started speaking positively about Maria. Mrs. felt like she was losing control. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She found out which piece Maria would be performing and hired a private investigator to dig up information about Maria's past. She hoped to find something scandalous, something that would disqualify Maria or turn the town against her. But the investigator came back with nothing. Maria's life was an open book. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a woman who had overcome incredible hardship. The investigator told Mrs. about Maria's childhood poverty, her father's death, her years of labor. Instead of feeling triumphant, Mrs. felt uncomfortable. She did not want to admit it, but she was starting to feel something like shame. She had laughed at a woman who had suffered more than she could ever imagine. 2 weeks before the competition, Maria received a letter in the mail. It was from the organizing committee, confirming her participation and providing details about the event. The competition would be held at a grand theater in the regional capital, about 2 hours away from Maria's town. There would be 15 competitors in her category, adults who had been playing for less than 3 years. The judges were respected music professors from universities across the country. Maria read the letter over and over. The reality of what she had committed to finally hit her. She was going to perform in front of judges, in front of an audience, in front of people who had studied music their whole lives. What if she made a mistake? What if she forgot the notes? What if she embarrassed herself and everyone who had supported her? The fear was overwhelming. Maria sat in her small house and cried, found her and held her tight. "What is wrong, Mama?" she asked. "Are you hurt?" Maria shook her head. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am so scared. What if I am not good enough? What if Mrs. was right? What if the piano is not for people like me?" Pulled back and looked into her mother's eyes. "Listen to me, Mama. You have been the strongest person I know my whole life. You raised me alone. You worked 3 jobs to put food on our table. You never complained, never gave up, never stopped believing that life could be better. Playing the piano is just another challenge. And you have never failed at anything you truly wanted." Maria wiped her tears and took a deep breath. Her daughter was right. She had faced worse than a piano competition. She had survived poverty and loss and years of being invisible. She could survive this too. Isabella came by that evening and found Maria in a somber mood. She did not ask questions. Instead, she sat down at the piano and started playing. The music she chose was soft and gentle, a lullaby that floated through the small house like a comforting embrace. Maria closed her eyes and listened. The fear began to melt away, replaced by the familiar love for music that had started this whole journey. When Isabella finished, she turned to Maria and said, "Fear is normal. Every performer feels it, but remember why you started this. Remember the moment you first touched the piano and how it made you feel. That feeling is still inside you. It is stronger than any fear. Trust it." Maria nodded. She sat down at the keyboard of the old practice piano had bought from a second-hand store. It was a small electronic keyboard, nothing like the grand piano at the house, but it was hers, and right now it was enough. She began to play Claire Lune. The notes came easily, flowing from her fingers like water from a spring. She closed her eyes and let the music carry her away. She thought about her mother, who had loved singing but never had the chance to pursue her passion. She thought about her father, who had drowned in the sea when she was just a child. She thought about all the years of struggle and sacrifice, and she realized that this performance was not just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been told their dreams were too big. When she opened her eyes and Isabella were both crying, the music had touched them deeply. Maria knew then that she was ready. Whatever happened at the competition, she would give everything she had, and that would be enough. The day of the competition arrived faster than Maria expected. She woke up before dawn, her stomach tight with nerves, was already awake preparing breakfast. The smell of rice and eggs filled the small house. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten with the first hints of morning. Maria had not slept well. She had dreamed about the piano, about the stage, about Mrs. laughing at her. But when she opened her eyes and saw her daughter's loving face, the nightmares faded. Today was the day she had worked toward for nearly a year. Today was the day she would show the world what she was capable of. Isabella arrived at 6 o'clock with her car. They had a 2-hour drive ahead of them. Mrs. had offered to let Maria practice on the grand piano one last time the night before, but Maria had declined. She felt ready. Any more practice would only increase her anxiety. The car ride was quiet. Maria sat in the back seat, looking out the window at the passing landscape. The rice fields gave way to small towns, then to larger cities. The buildings grew taller and the traffic grew heavier. Maria had not been to the regional capital in many years. The busy streets and crowded sidewalks made her feel small and overwhelmed. The theater where the competition would be held was a magnificent building in the center of the city. It had tall white columns and wide stone steps leading up to the entrance. Maria stood at the bottom of the steps and stared up at the building. This was where she would perform. This was where her dream would either come true or fall apart. Inside, the theater was even more impressive. Red velvet curtains framed the stage. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Row after row of plush seats filled the auditorium. Maria had never been in a place so grand. She felt completely out of place in her simple dress and worn shoes. Isabella guided Maria to the registration desk, where they received her competitor number and schedule. Maria was number 12 out of 15 performers. She would play in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock. That gave her several hours to wait and watch the other competitors. The waiting area backstage was filled with nervous musicians. Some were young, some were middle-aged, some were older than Maria. They all had different backgrounds and different stories, but they all shared the same anxious energy. They paced back and forth, flexed their fingers, whispered to themselves. Maria found a quiet corner and tried to calm her racing heart. The competition began at 10 o'clock. Maria watched from the side of the stage as the first competitor took the seat at the beautiful concert grand piano. He was a young man in his 20s, dressed in a sharp black suit. He played a complicated piece by Chopin with impressive speed and precision. The audience applauded enthusiastically when he finished. One by one, the competitors performed. Some were excellent, some were good, some made obvious mistakes. Maria studied each performance carefully, noticing the different styles and techniques. She also noticed the judges, 3 serious-looking people sitting in the front row with clipboards and pens. They wrote constantly, making notes on every detail. As the morning passed, Maria's nerves intensified. Her hands were cold and clammy. Her mouth was dry. She kept running through Claire Lune in her mind, imagining each note, each phrase, each dynamic change. She was terrified of forgetting something, of making a mistake that would ruin everything. Around noon, arrived at the theater. She had taken a bus from their town, refusing to miss her mother's performance. She found Maria backstage and hugged her tight. "How are you feeling, Mama?" she asked. "Scared," Maria admitted. "The other players are so good. I do not know if I can compete with them." Took her mother's hands and held them firmly. "You are not here to compete with them, Mama. You are here to tell your story. Just focus on the music. Forget about the judges, forget about the audience, forget about everything except the piano. You know this piece better than you know yourself. Trust your fingers. They will not let you down." Maria nodded, drawing strength from her daughter's words. She closed her eyes and took several deep breaths. She thought about all the nights she had spent practicing alone in the dark community center. She thought about in his cups of ginger tea. She thought about Isabella's patient teaching and Mrs.'s unexpected kindness. So many people had helped her get here. She could not let them down. At 1:30, the 11th competitor finished her performance. It was almost Maria's turn. A stage assistant came to get her, leading her to the wings of the stage. Maria could see the piano from where she stood. It gleamed under the bright lights, waiting for her. Competitor number 12, Maria Santos. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. Maria walked onto the stage. Her legs felt weak, like they might collapse at any moment. The lights were blinding. She could not see the audience clearly, just a sea of dark shapes. She walked to the piano and sat down on the bench. The seat was perfectly adjusted. The keys were smooth and cool under her trembling fingers. She looked out at the audience one more time. Somewhere out there, and Isabella were watching. Somewhere out there, people were waiting to judge her. But in this moment, none of that mattered. There was only Maria and the piano. There was only the music. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Claire Lune floated into the air, soft and delicate as moonlight. Maria's fingers moved with a confidence she did not know she had. The hours and hours of practice had prepared her for this moment. Her body knew what to do, even if her mind was still filled with fear. As she played, Maria forgot about the competition. She forgot about the judges and the audience. She forgot about Mrs. and her cruel laughter. She was transported to another place, a place where only the music existed. She thought about her mother's voice, singing lullabies in their tiny home. She thought about the river where she used to sit as a child, watching the moonlight dance on the water. She poured all of her memories, all of her pain, all of her hope into the music. The middle section of the piece required more intensity. Maria's fingers moved faster, bringing out the passionate climax of the composition. She felt tears forming in her eyes but did not let them fall. She channeled the emotion into her playing, letting the piano express what words could never say. Then came the gentle ending, the return to the soft, dreamy melody of the beginning. Maria slowed down, savoring each note. She wanted the music to last forever, but all too soon the final chord faded into silence. For a moment there was no sound in the theater. Maria sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. Then the applause began. It started slowly, a few people clapping, then more, then everyone. The sound grew louder and louder until it filled the entire auditorium. Maria stood up and faced the audience. Tears were streaming down her cheeks now, and she did not try to stop them. She saw in the front row, standing and cheering with her hands raised high. She saw Isabella, her face wet with tears. She saw strangers on their feet giving her a standing ovation. She bowed once, twice, 3 times. The applause continued. She walked off the stage in a daze, not quite believing what had just happened. Backstage, Isabella rushed to embrace her. "That was perfect," Isabella whispered. "Absolutely perfect. You did it, Maria, you really did it." Maria could not speak. She was overwhelmed with emotion. She had played her heart out on that stage. She had told her story to hundreds of strangers, and they had heard her. They had understood. Whatever the judges decided, Maria knew she had already won something more valuable than any trophy. She had proven to herself that her dream was real. She had shown the world that a cleaning lady from a small town could make beautiful music, and that was a victory no one could ever take away. The remaining 3 competitors performed after Maria. She watched them from backstage, but her mind was elsewhere. The adrenaline from her performance was slowly fading, leaving her exhausted and emotional. Sat beside her, holding her hand, not saying anything. Words were not necessary. The connection between mother and daughter was enough. The last competitor finished at around 3:30. The announcer informed the audience that the judges would need an hour to deliberate. The results would be announced at 4:30. Until then, competitors and their guests were invited to wait in the lobby or explore the surrounding area. Maria and Isabella found a quiet bench outside the theater. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces. Maria leaned back and closed her eyes, replaying her performance in her mind. Had she played well enough? Had the judges noticed her mistakes? There had been a slight hesitation in the second section, a moment where she almost lost her timing. Would that cost her points? Isabella seemed to read her thoughts. "Stop worrying," she said gently. "What is done is done. You played beautifully. The rest is out of your hands." Went to buy some snacks from a nearby vendor. She returned with fresh spring rolls and cold drinks. Maria realized she had not eaten anything since breakfast. She was suddenly very hungry. The 3 women ate in comfortable silence, watching the city move around them. At 4 o'clock, people began returning to the theater. The lobby was buzzing with nervous energy. Competitors huddled with their families and coaches, whispering predictions and hopes. Maria recognized some of the other performers and exchanged polite nods with them. They were all in the same boat, waiting for their fate to be decided. At exactly 4:30, the doors to the auditorium opened. Everyone filed back inside and took their seats. The stage was empty except for a small podium and 3 chairs where the judges sat. The head judge, an elderly man with white hair and kind eyes, stood up and approached the podium. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began. "On behalf of the judging panel, I want to thank all the competitors for their outstanding performances today. This was one of the most difficult decisions we have ever had to make. The level of talent we witnessed was truly remarkable." Maria's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She gripped his hand tightly. Isabella sat on her other side, equally tense. The judge continued, "Before we announce the results, I want to say something about what we were looking for. Technical skill is important, of course, but it is not everything. We also looked for musicality, for emotion, for the ability to connect with the audience. A truly great performance is not just about playing the right notes. It is about telling a story, about sharing something real and human with the listeners." Maria felt a flicker of hope. She knew her technique was not perfect. She had only been playing for a year, but she had tried to tell her story through the music. She had tried to share her heart. The judge picked up an envelope from the podium. "Now, without further delay, let me announce the results. In 3rd place, winning a certificate of recognition and a gift voucher for music supplies, is competitor number 7, James." A young man in the middle of the auditorium stood up and made his way to the stage. He was grinning broadly as he received his award. The audience applauded warmly. "In 2nd place," the judge continued, "winning a scholarship for piano lessons at the Regional Music Academy is competitor number 3, Mendoza." A woman in her 30s walked to the stage. She was crying happy tears as she accepted her prize. Maria applauded with the rest of the audience, but her stomach was tight with anxiety. There was only one prize left, and she had not heard her name. The judge cleared his throat. "And now, the moment you have all been waiting for. The 1st-place winner of this year's regional piano competition will receive a full scholarship to study at the National Music Conservatory, plus the honor of performing at the Grand Christmas Concert in Manila." The auditorium fell silent. Maria could barely breathe. She felt his grip on her hand tighten painfully. The 1st-place winner, chosen unanimously by all 3 judges, is... The pause felt like an eternity. Competitor number 12, Maria Santos. Maria did not move. She did not react. She sat frozen in her seat, unable to process what she had just heard, then screamed with joy and threw her arms around her mother. Isabella was laughing and crying at the same time. The audience was on its feet, clapping and cheering. "Mama, you won! You won, you did it!" was sobbing, her words barely coherent. Maria stood up slowly, still dazed. The applause grew louder as she made her way to the stage. Her legs moved automatically. Her mind was blank. She climbed the steps and stood before the judge, who was smiling warmly. "Congratulations, Maria," he said, shaking her hand. "Your performance was extraordinary. The way you played Claire Lune was deeply moving. We could feel your story in every note. It was clear that you were not just playing music. You were sharing your soul." Maria accepted the trophy and the envelope containing her scholarship information. She turned to face the audience and saw a sea of standing, cheering people. Somewhere in the crowd, a camera was flashing. Someone was recording a video on their phone. This moment would be remembered forever. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free. She stood on the stage, holding her trophy, crying tears of pure joy. The cleaning lady who was laughed at for wanting to play piano had just won the regional competition. The impossible had become possible. After the ceremony, Maria was surrounded by well-wishers. Strangers came up to her, shaking her hand, congratulating her, asking for photos. Journalists from local newspapers wanted to interview her. Television cameras pointed in her direction. She answered questions as best she could, still feeling like she was in a dream. One of the judges, a distinguished woman who taught at a university in Manila, approached Maria privately. "I want you to know something," she said quietly. "Your story touched all of us. When we read your registration form and saw that you had only been playing for a year, we were skeptical. But then you played and we understood. You have something that cannot be taught. You have heart. Please do not waste this gift." Maria promised she would not. She promised to work hard, to continue learning, to make the most of this opportunity. The judge smiled and patted her hand. As the sun began to set, Maria and Isabella finally left the theater. They walked to Isabella's car, carrying the trophy and the flowers that people had given them. Maria stopped at the top of the stone steps and looked back at the grand building. Just this morning, she had stood at the bottom of these steps, terrified and doubting herself. Now she was leaving as a champion. The drive home was filled with laughter and happy tears. They called everyone they knew to share the news. Almost dropped his phone when he heard. Mrs. demanded that Maria come over immediately so they could celebrate. Even some of the families Maria cleaned for sent congratulatory messages. When they finally arrived home, it was late at night, but the whole neighborhood was waiting for them. Lanterns hung from the trees. A banner reading "Congratulations, Maria" stretched across the small street. The fish vendor, the vegetable seller, the neighbors and their children, they were all there to welcome their local hero home. Maria stepped out of the car and was immediately embraced by the crowd. People she had known for decades, people who had watched her struggle and survive, were now celebrating her triumph. The joy in the air was thick and warm, like a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at the stars and thought about her mother, her father, everyone who had loved her and left too soon. She hoped they were watching from somewhere above. She hoped they were proud. This victory was for them too. It was for every person who had ever dared to dream despite the odds. The celebration lasted until the early hours of the morning. Maria barely got any sleep, but she did not care. She had never been happier in her entire life. And this was just the beginning. The news of Maria's victory spread far beyond her small town. Local newspapers picked up the story first. Their headlines were irresistible. "Cleaning lady wins piano competition after being mocked," and "From scrubbing floors to concert halls." Then regional television stations came calling, wanting to do features on this remarkable woman. Within a week, Maria's story had reached the national media. A morning talk show in Manila invited Maria for an interview. She had never been on television before and was terrified at the prospect, but Isabella encouraged her to go. This was a chance to inspire others, they said. This was a chance to show people that dreams have no expiration date. Maria traveled to Manila with Isabella. The capital city was overwhelming, bigger and louder than anything she had ever experienced. The television studio was a maze of bright lights and busy people. Makeup artists fussed over her face. Sound technicians attached tiny microphones to her dress. Directors shouted instructions that Maria did not understand. When the cameras started rolling, Maria's nerves disappeared. The hosts were kind and genuine. They asked about her childhood, her struggles, her decision to learn piano at 47. Maria told her story simply and honestly. She talked about the day she first touched the piano keys. She talked about Mrs. and the women who had laughed at her. She talked about Isabella, Mrs., and all the others who had supported her journey. Near the end of the interview, one of the hosts asked Maria to play something. A beautiful grand piano had been set up in the studio. Maria walked over and sat down. She chose to play a simple Filipino folk song that her mother used to sing. The melody was gentle and nostalgic, filled with memories of home. When she finished, the hosts were visibly moved. The studio audience applauded enthusiastically. One of the hosts wiped a tear from her eye and said, "Maria, your story is a reminder that it is never too late to follow your dreams. Thank you for inspiring all of us." The interview aired the following day and was watched by millions of people across the country. Maria's social media accounts, which had helped her set up, exploded with followers. Messages poured in from strangers who had been touched by her story. Some shared their own experiences of being told they were not good enough. Others thanked Maria for giving them the courage to pursue their own dreams. Back home, the attention was both exciting and overwhelming. Maria was recognized everywhere she went. People stopped her on the street to ask for photos and autographs. Children pointed at her and whispered to their parents. The fish vendor started giving her free fish. The jeepney drivers refused to accept her fare. But not everyone was celebrating. Mrs. had watched the television interview with growing discomfort. She saw Maria talk about being laughed at by wealthy women at the community center. She saw the sympathetic expressions of the hosts, the disapproval in their voices when they discussed people who mocked the dreams of others. Mrs. knew that everyone in town knew she was one of those women. She had become a villain in a story that was being told across the nation. At first, Mrs. tried to defend herself. She told her friends that Maria had exaggerated, that the incident had been misunderstood. But even her closest allies started to distance themselves. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who had tried to crush a poor cleaning lady's dreams. One evening, Mrs. sat alone in her large, expensive house. Her husband was away on business. Her children lived in other cities. The silence was deafening. She thought about her life, about all the things she had and all the things she lacked. She had money and status and beautiful clothes. But when had she last felt the kind of joy she had seen on Maria's face? When had she last pursued something purely for the love of it? For the first time in many years, Mrs. cried. She cried for the person she had become, a bitter woman who found satisfaction in belittling others. She cried for the dreams she had abandoned long ago, the passions she had set aside in pursuit of wealth and social standing. She cried for Maria, whom she had hurt without reason. The next morning, Mrs. made a decision. She went to the community center and found Maria practicing in the piano room. Maria looked up, surprised and wary. The last time they had been in this room together, Mrs. had humiliated her. Mrs. stood in the doorway, her usual confident posture replaced by something more humble. "I came to apologize," she said, her voice unsteady. "What I did to you was wrong. I laughed at you because I was jealous. You had something I lost a long time ago, the courage to chase your dreams. I am sorry, Maria. I am truly sorry." Maria stared at the woman who had caused her so much pain. She could have been angry. She could have rejected the apology, reminded Mrs. of all the suffering she had caused. But Maria had never been a bitter person. Life had taught her that holding onto anger only hurts the one who holds it. "I forgive you," Maria said simply. "I hope you find whatever you are looking for." Mrs. nodded, tears streaming down her face. She turned and walked out of the room without another word. Maria watched her go, feeling something she had not expected: sympathy. She understood now that Mrs. was not a monster. She was just a woman who had lost her way. The Christmas concert in Manila was approaching fast. Maria had only a few weeks to prepare. The scholarship she had won gave her access to professional coaching at the National Music Conservatory. She traveled to Manila several times for intensive training sessions with renowned instructors. They refined her technique, expanded her repertoire, and helped her develop as an artist. The Grand Christmas Concert was one of the biggest musical events in the country. It was held at the Cultural Center of the Philippines, a massive auditorium that could seat thousands of people. Past performers included international stars and world-class orchestras. Maria would be sharing the stage with some of the most talented musicians in the country. The pressure was immense. This was not a small regional competition. This was a national stage, with television cameras and music critics and the eyes of the entire nation watching. Maria felt the weight of expectations pressing down on her. She was no longer just a cleaning lady with a dream. She was a symbol of hope for millions of people. She could not afford to fail. Isabella came to Manila to help Maria prepare. They practiced together for hours every day. Isabella pushed Maria harder than ever before, demanding perfection in every phrase, every dynamic, every gesture. Maria's fingers ached. Her back screamed in protest, but she kept going. She had come too far to stop now. Called every night to encourage her mother. "Remember why you started," she would say. "Remember the joy you felt when you first touched those keys. That joy is still there, Mama. Do not let the pressure bury it." Maria took her daughter's words to heart. She reminded herself that music was not about perfection. It was about expression, about connection, about sharing something beautiful with others. The critics and the cameras did not matter. What mattered was the music itself. The night before the concert, Maria could not sleep. She lay in her hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. She thought about her mother's songs and her father's gentle smile. She thought about the poverty and the struggle and the long, hard years of survival. She thought about the laughing women and the supportive friends and the unexpected kindness of strangers. All of these experiences had shaped her. All of them had prepared her for tomorrow. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Maria finally felt at peace. Whatever happened at the concert, she knew she had already won. She had proven that dreams do not have age limits. She had shown that the human spirit cannot be crushed by mockery or doubt. Tomorrow, she would play her heart out, and that would be enough. The cultural center of the Philippines was bathed in golden light as the sun began to set on Christmas Eve. Thousands of people streamed through the entrance, dressed in their finest clothes, buzzing with anticipation for the grand Christmas concert. Inside, the auditorium was a masterpiece of architecture, with soaring ceilings and perfect acoustics designed to showcase the finest performances. Maria arrived at the venue 3 hours before the show. She was escorted through a private entrance, away from the crowds. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric with nervous energy. Dancers stretched in corners. Singers warmed up their voices. Orchestra members tuned their instruments. Maria found a quiet dressing room and sat down, trying to calm her racing heart. A makeup artist came to prepare her for the stage. Maria had never worn so much makeup in her life. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her gray hair had been styled elegantly. Her simple dress had been replaced by a beautiful gown, a gift from the concert organizers. She looked like someone important, someone who belonged on this grand stage. Arrived an hour before the show, having traveled from there with a group of supporters. The fish vendor, the vegetable seller, Mrs., even some of Maria's former employers, they had all made the trip to watch Maria perform. Isabella was there too, of course, looking proud and emotional. "How are you feeling, Mama?" asked, holding her mother's hands. Maria smiled weakly. "Like I might faint at any moment, but also strangely calm. Is that normal?" Laughed. "Nothing about you is normal, Mama. You are extraordinary, and tonight the whole country will see it." The concert began at 8 o'clock sharp. The program featured a variety of performances: traditional folk dances, operatic arias, chamber music ensembles, and world-class soloists. Maria watched some of the performances on a monitor in her dressing room. The level of talent was breathtaking. These were professional artists who had trained their whole lives. How could she possibly compare? Her segment was scheduled for 9:30, near the end of the first half. As the time approached, a stage manager came to escort her to the wings. Maria followed on trembling legs. The sounds of the current performance filtered through the walls. A violin concerto played with stunning virtuosity. The audience applauded thunderously when it ended. The host of the concert, a famous television personality, walked onto the stage. Maria could hear his voice through the speakers. "Ladies, and our next performer has one of the most inspiring stories we have ever encountered. Less than 2 years ago, she was a cleaning lady who had never touched a piano. She was told her dream was impossible, that music was not for people like her. Tonight, she stands on this stage as proof that dreams have no limits. Please welcome Maria Santos." The applause began before Maria even stepped onto the stage. She walked out into the blinding lights, her heart pounding like a drum. The concert grand piano waited for her at the center of the stage, gleaming under the spotlights. It was the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. She made her way to the piano and sat down on the bench. The auditorium fell silent. Thousands of eyes watched her. Millions more were watching on television. Maria took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. For a long moment she did not move. She closed her eyes and thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The poverty, the struggle, the laughter, the tears, the endless hours of practice, the love and support of her daughter, her teacher, her community. All of it had led to this. She opened her eyes and began to play. The piece she had chosen was not Claire Lune, the song that had won her the competition. Instead, she played something new, a piece she had composed herself during the weeks of preparation. It was called, which means light in Tagalog. She had written it as a tribute to her mother, the woman who had taught her to find light even in the darkest times. The music started softly, like the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. Maria's fingers moved gently across the keys, painting a picture of quiet hope and perseverance. The melody was simple but deeply moving, rooted in the folk songs of her childhood. Then the music grew more intense, reflecting the struggles and hardships of her life. The tempo increased. The dynamics swelled. Maria's whole body moved with the music, pouring every ounce of emotion into the performance. She thought about her father drowning in the sea, her mother working herself to exhaustion, the years of scrubbing floors and washing clothes. The pain was there, raw and real, flowing through her fingers into the piano. But the music did not end in darkness. It built toward a triumphant climax, a celebration of survival and hope. Maria played with all the strength she had, her rough hands flying across the keys, producing sounds of incredible power and beauty. This was her story, told in music, shared with the world. The final notes were soft again, returning to the gentle theme of light. Maria held the last chord for a long moment, letting it fade into silence. Then she lifted her hands from the keys and sat still, her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. The silence that followed was profound. For a heartbeat, Maria was terrified that she had failed, that the audience had not understood, that her music had not connected. Then the applause began. It started as a wave and grew into a tsunami. The entire auditorium rose to its feet. People were cheering, shouting, crying. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, incredible. Maria stood up from the piano bench and faced the audience. She could see people wiping their eyes, clutching each other, moved beyond words by what they had just witnessed. In the audience was sobbing uncontrollably. Isabella had her arm around her, tears streaming down her own face. The old security guard was standing on his chair, clapping his weathered hands with all his might. Mrs. was pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. Even Mrs., who had come to watch from the back of the auditorium, was crying. Maria bowed deeply again and again. The applause did not stop. People were shouting bravo, and more. The host had to wait several minutes before the audience would quiet down enough for him to speak. That, he said, his voice thick with emotion, was one of the most beautiful performances I have ever witnessed. Maria Santos, thank you for sharing your light with us. Maria was led off the stage in a daze. Backstage, she was surrounded by people congratulating her, hugging her, shaking her hand. The concert organizers told her that her performance would be the one people remembered for years to come. Critics who had been skeptical of a self-taught performer were now praising her as a true artist. The rest of the concert passed in a blur. Maria barely registered the performances that followed. She sat in her dressing room, surrounded by flowers and messages of congratulation, trying to process what had just happened. She had played her own composition on the biggest stage in the country, and the audience had loved it. After the concert, there was a reception for the performers and VIP guests. Maria was treated like a celebrity. Politicians and business leaders approached her, wanting to be photographed with the inspirational cleaning lady who had conquered the music world. Television reporters asked for interviews. Record labels expressed interest in working with her. Through it all, Maria remained humble and gracious. She credited her success to the people who had supported her: Isabella, Mrs., and all the others. She said that her victory belonged to everyone who had ever been told their dreams were impossible. She was just one example of what could happen when someone refused to give up. Late that night, Maria finally escaped the crowds and found a quiet corner with. Mother and daughter sat together, exhausted but happy. The city lights twinkled outside the window. Christmas music played softly in the background. "You did it," Mama whispered. "You really did it." Maria smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand. "We did it," she corrected. "I could never have done this without you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the night sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new dreams. But tonight, Maria allowed herself to simply be happy. She had started this journey as a cleaning lady with rough hands and an impossible dream. She was ending it as a musician, an inspiration, a light for others to follow. The girl who had been told the piano was not for people like her had proven everyone wrong. And this was only the beginning. 3 years had passed since that magical Christmas Eve performance. Maria's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The cleaning lady from the small town by the river had become a national treasure, a symbol of hope and perseverance for millions of people across the Philippines and beyond. After the concert, offers had poured in from every direction. Record labels wanted to sign her. Concert halls wanted to book her. Schools and universities wanted her to speak to their students. Maria accepted some opportunities and declined others. She was careful not to lose herself in the whirlwind of fame. She remembered where she came from and stayed true to her roots. She recorded her first album in the summer following the Christmas concert. It was a collection of original compositions and traditional folk songs, all played on the piano with the emotional depth that had become her trademark. The album was called, named after the piece she had performed at the grand concert. It sold more copies than anyone expected and received critical acclaim both at home and abroad. Maria used the money from the album to do something she had dreamed about for years. She opened a music school in her, specifically for children from poor families. The school was called the Light Academy, and it offered free lessons in piano, guitar, violin, and voice. The building was simple, nothing fancy, but it was filled with love and hope. Children who would never have had the chance to learn music were now discovering their own talents. Had graduated from college with honors and had become one of the teachers at the Light Academy. She taught English and music theory to the younger students. Watching her mother's transformation had inspired to pursue her own dreams of becoming an educator. Mother and daughter worked side by side, passing on the gift of music to a new generation. Isabella remained Maria's closest friend and advisor. She had moved to the small town to help run the Light Academy. Her expertise in music education was invaluable. She developed the curriculum, trained new teachers, and continued to mentor Maria in her musical development. The bond between the two women had grown into something deeper than teacher and student. They were family now. The old security guard who had first opened the community center doors for Maria had passed away peacefully in his sleep a year after the Christmas concert. Maria had played at his funeral, a simple but beautiful melody that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She had never forgotten his kindness, his cups of ginger tea, his quiet encouragement during those lonely nights of practice. A scholarship at the Light Academy was named in his honor. Mrs. had become one of the Academy's biggest supporters. She donated generously and visited often, watching the children practice on the piano that had once sat unused in her living room. That piano now stood proudly in the main hall of the Light Academy, where Maria had personally overseen its placement. Every student who played on it was told the story of how it had helped transform a cleaning lady into a concert pianist. As for Mrs., her story had taken an unexpected turn. After her apology to Maria, she had done some deep soul-searching. She had rediscovered her own love for the arts, a passion she had abandoned decades ago in pursuit of social status. She started taking painting classes at the community center. She was not very good at first, but she kept trying. Maria saw her sometimes, hunched over a canvas, her face scrunched in concentration. They would exchange nods of acknowledgement. Two women who had both learned something important about life and second chances. Maria still performed regularly, but she was selective about her appearances. She preferred intimate concerts over grand spectacles. She liked playing for small audiences where she could see the faces of the listeners, where she could feel the connection between her music and their hearts. She had turned down offers to perform in Europe and America, choosing instead to focus on her work at home. But one invitation was different. It came from the very community center where her journey had begun, the same room where she had first touched a piano and been laughed at by wealthy women. They were hosting a special anniversary celebration and wanted Maria to be the featured performer. Maria accepted immediately. It felt right to return to where everything had started. She wanted to close the circle, to show the world that the place where she had been humiliated was also the place where she had found her calling. The evening of the performance arrived. The community center had been decorated with flowers and lights. Every seat was filled with people from the town and beyond. In the front row sat Isabella, Mrs., and the students from the Light Academy. Behind them were neighbors, friends, former employers, and strangers who had traveled from far away just to see Maria play. Maria walked onto the small stage wearing a simple dress, the same style she had always worn, nothing fancy or pretentious. The piano in the center of the stage was the same old instrument she had practiced on during those early days. It had been tuned and polished, but it still had the same worn keys and slightly imperfect sound. Maria preferred it that way. This piano had been her first teacher. She sat down and looked out at the audience. So many familiar faces, so many memories. She thought about that afternoon years ago when she had sat in this very spot and been told that the piano was not for people like her. She thought about the tears she had cried walking home that day. She thought about the fire that had burned inside her ever since. Maria smiled and placed her hands on the keys. She had prepared a special program for tonight, a mix of classical pieces, folk songs, and her own compositions. But she decided to start with something unplanned, something from the heart. She began to speak, her voice soft but clear. Many years ago, I walked into this room for the first time. I was a cleaning lady who had never had a piano lesson in her life. I just wanted to touch the keys and hear the sound they made. Some people laughed at me that day. They told me I was foolish for dreaming of playing music. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. I want to thank those people, Maria continued. Their laughter lit a fire inside me. It made me determined to prove that dreams do not care about age or money or education. Dreams only care about one thing, how badly you want them. She turned back to the piano. I also want to thank everyone who believed in me when I could not believe in myself. My daughter, who never doubted me for a moment. My teacher, Isabella, who saw potential where others saw nothing. Who is watching from heaven tonight? Mrs., who opened her home and her heart. And all of you, my community, my family, my source of strength. Maria took a deep breath and began to play. The music that filled the room was unlike anything she had performed before. It was a new composition, one she had written specifically for this moment. It told the story of her journey from beginning to end. The poverty, the laughter, the practice, the triumph, the love. The melody wove through emotions like a thread through fabric, connecting past and present, pain and joy, struggle and success. As she played, Maria felt something she had never felt before. It was complete peace, a sense of perfect rightness with the world. She had found her purpose. She had fulfilled her dream. And now she was using her gift to help others find their own dreams. The music built to a gentle crescendo and then faded into a soft, hopeful ending. The last note hung in the air for a long moment before disappearing into silence. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. People rose to their feet, not because they were supposed to, but because they felt compelled to. They clapped and cheered and wiped away tears. Maria stood and bowed, her heart overflowing with gratitude. After the performance, people lined up to speak with Maria. She hugged each person, listened to their stories, encouraged their dreams. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, tugged at her dress and asked, "Teacher Maria, do you think I could learn to play the piano like you?" Maria knelt down so she was eye level with the child. She took the girl's small hands in her own rough, calloused palms. "You can do anything you want," she said. "It does not matter where you come from or what anyone tells you. If you love music, if you are willing to work hard, you can learn. I am living proof." The little girl's eyes sparkled with hope. Maria saw herself in that child, saw all the children who had ever been told their dreams were too big, and she knew that her work was far from over. The Light Academy was just the beginning. There were so many more souls to inspire, so many more dreams to nurture, so much more music to share with the world. That night, after everyone had gone home and the community center was quiet again, Maria sat alone at the old piano. The moonlight streamed through the window, just like it had on the first night she had practiced here. She played softly, not for an audience, not for applause, but simply for the joy of making music. She had asked to play the piano, and everyone had laughed. So she did. And in doing so, she had changed not only her own life, but the lives of countless others who needed proof that impossible dreams are possible after all. The cleaning lady who loved music had become a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope for anyone brave enough to chase their dreams. And the music played on.